Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House, I'm greatly honored to rise and ask for your support of House Resolution 392, which would declare November 7th, 2019 as the Victims of Communism Memorial Day in Pennsylvania. The Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation is a nonprofit organization that was actually authorized by unanimous vote by the U.S. Congress to educate the public regarding the more than 100 million lives lost to the atrocities of communism during the 20th century. One of the foundation's most important priorities is to encourage state legislatures to introduce legislation to remember the victims of communism every November 7th. November 7th, 2019 marks 102 years since the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, which resulted in the world's first communist regime under Vladimir Lenin. House Resolution 392 is also in full agreement with President Donald Trump, who will be recognizing the Victims of Communism Memorial Day at the national level for the third consecutive year by declaring that communism as a political philosophy is incompatible with liberty, prosperity, and preserving the dignity of human life. If you truly believe our founding documents from the Declaration of Independence to the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights, then you cannot subscribe to the teachings of Karl Marx or condone the genocidal actions of Joseph Stalin, Pol Pot, or Chairman Mao. Article 1, Section 1 of the Pennsylvania Constitution makes it abundantly clear that, and I quote, all men are born equally free and independent and have certain inherent and indefeasible rights, among which are those of enjoying and defending life and liberty, of acquiring, possessing, and protecting property and reputation, and pursuing their own happiness, end quote. If you are thankful for the freedoms as an American citizen, you simply cannot embrace communism. For communism, everything is owned by the state. You don't have the right to possess property or to seek to own property. In our constitutional American republic, we the people have the right to own and secure property. In wickedly evil, sharp contrast, communism makes the false promise of equality, but only delivers atrocities. Under communist rule, the only things you may have in your possession are things which the state decides you may have. While countless victims of communism are unconsciously slaughtered and silenced for simply speaking out against injustice and tyranny. Once again, in fact, I was going to submit these things, but I'm going to read two, just to give you an idea. There were a group of 6 socialists in France who, once the Soviet Union fell, decided to go and examine what was going on in the Soviet Union. And let me read from Lenin. Comrades, the Kulak uprising in your 5 districts must be crushed without pity. The interests of the whole revolution demand such actions, for the final struggle with the kulaks has now begun. You must make an example of these people. 1, hang, I mean publicly, so that the people see it, at least 100 kulaks, rich bastards and known bloodsuckers. 2, publish their names. 3, seize all their grain. 4, single out the hostages per man.
Will you please just suspend for 1 moment? There are members who wish to object, but I need to outline where we are at this stage. These are not Rule 35 resolutions. What we're doing at this point, and everybody knows this and everybody's been alerted to this fact, every resolution is assigned to a committee. A committee can or cannot pass a resolution out of that committee. This resolution came out of a committee. I'm not sure what committee it came out of. House Resolution 392. Then it gets listed for a vote. Typically, I do all the votes at the end of session. Guess, maybe we're gonna have to revisit this if this is where we're headed, but if members have resolutions that came out of the committee and get listed for a vote, if they have guests here, because I don't wanna hold the guests back, we are having the members introduce their guests and speak on their resolutions. There will be a vote on each resolution. There will be a separate vote on each resolution. That's when we're doing it. And any member will be able to speak on, please wait. Any member will be able to speak on that specific resolution when we put it up for a vote. And every member will be able to speak on it. Please speak to your leadership. I have them up here. That's the process. We're going to let Representative Dush finish his remarks on House Resolution 392. We are not going to vote it till afterwards. And it is not on unanimous consent. This is on the resolution. You may speak on a parliamentary inquiry, but this is the only one I'm going to entertain at this point. You may proceed, but you're the only one that I'm going to entertain at this point because I've outlined in detail where we are. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The parliamentary inquiry is the gentleman you stated is not speaking on unanimous consent.
He is speaking on House Resolution 392.
He's speaking on the resolution.
Which will be voted upon later today. Yes. And he's introducing guests. Now, here's what we're going to do, though, if this is where we're going to be. I will hold all remarks till the end of the day, even with guests, which means that guests have to stay the entire day. Every guest will have to stay the entire day because we do them at the end of the day. And that way everybody can speak. And the whole point of sending it to committee and bringing it out on the floor is that there is no unanimous consent.
Mr. Speaker, I didn't ask my question yet, but my question is can we have the resolution on the board?
We will when we put it up for the vote, and anybody will be able to speak on it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
And we are accommodating the guests for Representative DC, Representative Hanbidge and Malagary, and Representative Dush. That's what we're doing. We can also just decide that for any resolution, there's no more guests. And then everybody can be at the end of the day. But at this time, I'm going to let Representative Dush conclude his remarks and introduce his guests. And I think he has 8 guests. Okay, so at a certain point, Representative Dush, if you could introduce your guests, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Mr.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to finish the remarks from the Soviet President Lenin. Let me pick up at the beginning of this. It's just a single paragraph. Comrades, the Kulak uprising in your 5 districts must be crushed without pity. The interests of the whole revolution demand such actions, for the final struggle with the Kulaks is now begun. You must make an example of these people. 1, hang. I mean hang publicly so that the people see it. At least 100 Kulaks, rich bastards, known bloodsuckers. 2, publish their names. 3, seize all their grain. 4, single out the hostages per my instructions in yesterday's telegram. Do all this so that for miles around the people see it all, understand it, and tremble, and tell themselves that we are killing the bloodthirsty kulaks and that we will continue to do so. Reply by saying you have received and carry out these instructions. Yours, Lenin. P.S. Find tougher people. The reason he put that P.S. on there is because the terror that he was trying to inflict, his own people were starting to slow down. Let me continue on something he put on the Red Terror. The time has come to put a stop to all this weakness and sentimentality. All the right socialist revolutionaries must be arrested immediately. A great number of hostages must be taken among the officers and bourgeoisie. The slightest resistance must be greeted with widespread executions. Provincial executive committees must lead the way here. The Chekas and other organized militia must seek out and arrest the suspects and immediately execute all those found to be involved in the counter-revolutionary practices. Leaders of the executive committees must immediately report any weakness and indecision on the part of the local Soviets to the People's Commissariat of Internal Affairs. No weakness or indecision can be tolerated during this period of mass terror. The regime was actually identifying it as a terror campaign against its own people. We see it happening again in China. We see it happening in North Korea. We've seen it happen with Pol Pot and with Castro. This recognition of the victims of communism, as I said, was passed unanimously in both the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate. And the organization which was raised up to help memorialize this is the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. And if you would rise in the back as I introduce you, Christina Olney, the Director of Government Relations. Christina, would you stand?
Please, in the Sergeant at Arms, please close the doors of the House. And if you can, please articulate the names of each of our guests.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, standing is Christina Olney. She's the Director of Government Relations for the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. Elad Veda, Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation Government Relations Associate. Omar Kanat, World Uyghur Congress Executive Committee Chairman. And by the way, he provided some excellent testimony today at our press conference in the Rotunda of the oppression that his people are under, not only in China and the outlying provinces, but here in the United States, where the Chinese government is actively pursuing Uyghurs who are living here in the United States right now and intimidating them. Also, Ilyar Nasirov, a Uyghur from here in Harrisburg. Also with us, Carla Jones, the Director of International Relations and Federalism from the American Legislative Exchange Council. Dan Reynolds, Public Affairs Coordinator for the American Legislative Exchange Council. Also from the American Legislative Exchange Council, Eric Redburn, International Relations Intern, and Abe Akavong, a fellow working with the organization. I want to thank all of you for the testimony and for the support that you've provided and the efforts that you are doing to educate the people of the United States of America. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you to our guests for being here today.